So one of the first things that combat athletes always say when we talk about conditioning is that they don't want to do any conditioning. The only conditioning that they need is going to be met by just rolling more. So when you talk to like jiu-jitsu athletes, they have this idea that just rolling and doing more rolling is going to be adequate to improving conditioning. And even boxers, really all of them. And it typically comes from like an old school mentality when you speak to them. Now, I'll tell you why this is wrong. There are definitely elements of truth to it because naturally, whatever you do more of that's specific to your sport, so the more you play your sport, the better you get at your sport, the more efficient you become at the movements in that sport, and things like that. But that's not quite enough. So I'll give you at least one reason why just doing your sport, just rolling more, just boxing more, just doing more MMA rounds is not adequate for you to improve your conditioning. Well, now, what do we mean by conditioning in this context? What are we actually talking about? So what I'm talking about is the development of the cardiovascular system. Now, conditioning talks about, it's a very broad term, right? It's about you basically being ready and being able to meet the demands of your particular sport and being able to execute the skills that you need to execute even under conditions of fatigue, right? Not breaking down in your technical execution or your guard or what have you, even under conditions of fatigue. And being able to also withstand the different stresses of the particular situation that you're in. And not to mention, obviously, the fitness and the muscular conditioning that also goes along with that. But when we're talking about conditioning, what I'm talking about here is more specifically about cardiovascular system development, which is the base of all conditioning. So the reason why rolling more is not enough, wrestling more is not enough, doing more boxing rounds is not enough, is because in order to develop the cardiovascular system in the ways that it's supposed to develop, you need to be at a certain intensity. What do I mean more specifically? So part of the improvement of the cardiovascular system is by remodeling the heart, okay? So the heart has a left and a right ventricle. The left ventricle needs to, what happens is when you're training is blood gets pumped into the left ventricle. When it expands, blood fills up. And then when it contracts, the blood gets ejected to go out to working cells, working muscles, to give it oxygen so that it can work. Part of the improvement of your cardiovascular system is increasing the size of this left ventricle. So somebody who's untrained, the left ventricle of their heart might be, say, this big, right? Through training over years and years, and more specifically, the right intensity of cardiovascular training, the size of that left ventricle goes from this to something like this, for example. Now it can handle maybe double the amount of volume of blood in there per heartbeat. So when the heart expands, blood fills in and then it gets ejected out and oxygen goes out to working muscles. Now, if you increase the size of the left ventricle, you can get double the amount of blood, double the amount of oxygen per heartbeat. In order for the left ventricle to restructure and remodel, you need near maximum or maximum even filling up of the left ventricle with each heartbeat. So when the heart expands and blood comes into the left ventricle, the more full that left ventricle gets, it causes a stretch in the walls of the heart. And that stretch itself literally causes a stimulus for the body to increase the area inside the left ventricle over time. In order for that to happen, you need the heart rate to be under a certain amount. If the heart beats too fast, there isn't enough time allowed for as much blood as possible to fill up the left ventricle to stretch the walls out so that it can then contract and go out. And that's exactly what happens when you roll, right? So let's face it, nobody rolls every single round just nice and gentle. You start maybe nice and gentle, one person does something and then you want to one-up them, then they want to one-up you, and before you know it, you're both at near max heart rate, right? And so the heart doesn't have enough opportunity to expand completely, get blood filled out, get that stimulus of the left ventricle walls being stretched so that it can be remodeled and expand over time. You're going to understand this takes lots of volume to happen. It doesn't happen with like just 10-15 minutes of rolling and that's it. You need 20, 30 plus minutes depending on how experienced you are, how well developed your cardiovascular system already is, how well developed your heart is already. The more experienced you are, the more stimulus it's going to take, the longer duration you need to be under that heart rate range that is optimal for this remodeling to occur. But what happens is in real life is you will roll for a period of 3 to 5 or 6 rounds, and that's it. So we're talking 15 to a maximum of 30 minutes, and even within that, a lot of that is higher intensity. So you actually go above the sort of maximum heart rate that you want to be at, right? So typically, just give or take, as a rule of thumb, you don't want to be much above 150, maybe 160 beats per minute in terms of your heart rate, beats per minute. If you go any faster than that, then the heart's expanding and contracting too fast. So blood can't fill through the left ventricle adequately to cause that stretch. And so you are getting cardiovascular benefits for sure. It's not that it's completely useless, but you're not getting the benefits that you need to be getting, especially if you're somebody who just doesn't have that level of development in your cardiovascular system. You've got a deficiency and you really need to address it. If your cardio sucks, that's one of the first things you need to address. And for this reason, rolling is not enough, because you need an activity where you can actually control your heart rate. And typically that's done when you're just doing something by yourself, like jogging or swimming or going on the rower or jumping on a bike or whatever. And then holding that for a prolonged period of time. The other reason is, even if you were to able to find training partners that are going to respect that and, hold your heart rate within a range of 130 to 150 beats per minute for a 30-minute duration continuously while you're rolling. The other issue you hit here is that rolling all the time as the only way of improving your cardio is very jarring on the joints. It causes extra wear and tear. It's an inefficient way of bringing about those cardiovascular benefits, right? Even if you're going light, even if you're taking it easy, there is still some wear and tear that's being caused. When you go for a shot, even at medium intensity, your knee hits the ground. When you are applying an arm bar, for example, your arm still gets cranked a little bit. Your elbows still feel it a little bit. Why not eradicate that from your training and just take it nice and easy by doing something like jumping on a stationary bike, or just going for a nice jog on a treadmill, or anything else for that matter, to be able to bring about that cardiovascular benefit. And the thing is, as you get better and better, the duration of that exposure to stimulus has to be longer. 20 minutes not going to do it anymore. You need to be doing it for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, maybe even an hour, right? An hour of just constant rolling like that can be, first of all, nearly impossible because of the number of good training partners that you need. And then obviously, again, what I said in terms of wear and tear, niggles and things like that. And it's just not always so feasible. So for that reason, you want to have an actual plan when it comes to your cardiovascular training and your conditioning for jiu-jitsu. There are times when live rolling is necessary, especially as you're getting closer and closer into competition. Absolutely. That's when things need to be at a higher pace. But I'm talking here specifically about developing the cardiovascular system and some of the more specific changes and adaptations that come along with it, like, for example, the remodeling of the heart. And that happens more efficiently when you pick something that you have the control of the intensity over, and it causes less overall wear and tear on the body, so that you can control the time, the length and the duration of which you do that. And it's just a more effective way of controlling things for the long term.